Thank you for joining us again. We have our momentum is just it keeps going and going. Welcome to episode 7 of Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Joe Marcello. I'm joined as always with Orrin Phillips. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Tom Orzechowski, letterer and comic book legend. So like I said, our luck and our momentum keeps moving along. So thank you so much, Tom, for joining us.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. Orrin, by all means, go right ahead.
I was going to say one thing. Some of the names that you were dropping earlier of guys you came in with, Buckler, Starlin. These guys were big names. How cool was that you guys all came in together, that you sort of formed your own unit?
It kind of left me a little like fanboy disoriented because I'd lettered Jim's final fan work just about a year earlier, 18 months earlier. Okay. In I think early 72, he wanted to show John Romita his samples, and John hired him on the spot, and he was immediately doing layouts on the Amazing Spider-Man book. And penciling covers, and within like weeks he was writing and drawing Captain Marvel. So I'm sure he never expected that to happen. Now I had edited his final couple of scripts, just spelling corrections, maybe beefing up sentence fragments or taking out whatever an editor would do. And Roy Thomas kind of took me to the side and said, we don't have letterer editors. And it didn't occur to me that you just don't make arbitrary changes based on your own preferences. That you're part of a unit, I'm part of a factory. Right. And so I would do my job, and Roy would do his job, or else I'd go through proofreading with McGregor or Wolfman or Gerber, and they would make these changes. But it was, I think, having a fan background is actually a little disorienting because we did work as an assembly. There was. In 68, when I was 15, I met at my second Detroit Triple Fanfare, the convention that was there in town, when Detroit was still a booming industrial city. No sign it was going to collapse in a decade. Well, except I guess some people knew. Yeah. But I met Arvell Jones, who later on penciled Luke Cage, and the final issue to Black Panther. He penciled Iron Man for about a year while I was still lettering it. And then All-Star Squadron for Roy. And I went into commercial artwork because I guess the monthlies were just killing him, or else he realized he could make far more money in the real world, or both. But that's where I met Buckler, who'd already been, he was about 4 years older. Starlin was about 3 or 4 years older. He'd been in the military, and so on. So, we were the younger set. But, a guy named Greg Theakston, who created a way of bleaching, actually chemically bleaching the color out of the comics, the published comics. Rather than doing, because there was no Photoshop then, or whatever processes they use now. And just all these gifted, talented, imaginative people. A guy named Carl Lundgren, who you would not have heard of. He did paperback paintings for science fiction. In Detroit, he was doing posters for the rock and roll, the ballrooms, the rock and roll shows.
Oh, wow.
And so this amazing range of people. Sam Viviano was art director at Mad in its final 15 or 20 years. He is from there. On and on. Terry Austin, Keith Pollard, and Mike Nasser, old Netzer, as he became. And so, we were used to working. Lynn Varley, who I didn't know until years and years later, was from Detroit. She went to the same high school as Theakston and Netzer.
Okay. At
the same time. So we're used to working in, as a big pod of people doing the same kind of stuff as in a collective. And so, that's why I kind of took it for granted with Starlin. Oh yeah, of course, I'll just kind of touch up the script here and there.
Yeah.
No. And so I met Claremont that spring. X-Men was 2 years later. And that's the kind of environment it was, just all these new people bubbling in there and things about to happen. Just in rapid succession, because they suddenly had distribution of as many titles as they could, as much paper as they wanted, as many titles as they could possibly produce.
So I want to ask you, I know, you kind of touched on it. You're part of a factory more or less, and a much larger entity, but how much creative license do you have to do what you do? Are you in other words, do people come to you because you have your style and they want you for your style, or do they direct you in the sense that this is what we're looking for now? Go ahead and execute that.
After all this time, because it's been 49 years, people come to me because they know that I will just simply take control and go nuts in the way that's preferred. It's when McFarlane came to me with Image when that was a new thing, which was almost, this is like the 29th year of Spawn, the 29th year of Image, which I still think of this as the new company. But Marvel was a dozen years old when I started there.
Mm-hmm.
They were babies. They still might have failed throwing all these new concepts, Doc Savage, all these new things against the wall to see what would stick. And many would cancel after 6 issues. The Cat and Night Nurse, and you can just go on and on. I had to kind of argue with the editor to get X-Men full time because they were just giving it to me every other month, or maybe not even quite that often. I figured, well, why can't I just have a regular book? I'm tired of doing one of this and one of that, and Ghost Rider and What If, and just completely random access. And once it was definitely my title, I figured it's not tied to the Marvel Universe. So why should I make it look like Jim Novak is lettering the FF, or Joe Rosen is lettering Spider-Man? So I created different ways of approaching this stuff within parameters of acceptable comics. And no one ever said, why don't you look more like Marvel? So I figured, okay. So unless they tell me to stop, I got to keep going. I was living on the West Coast by then. I bugged out of Manhattan inside of 7 months because I just couldn't bear the strain. The deadline, being that close to the office. And the West Coast was, nice. And Manhattan was the office. Everywhere you look, it's the office. And San Francisco was very different. So yeah, I was much happier there. And with that distance, that removed from them, I guess they figured it's all legible, why raise a stink? And the sales keep going up. So let's keep, let's trust the people doing this, even if it seems irrational, to keep doing what they're doing.
I was going to say, with that infusion of young talent that you're talking about, was there an old guard there at Marvel? And how did they feel about you guys coming in with new ideas and, not reinventing the wheel, but making it better?
Well, Stan was the old man of the office. He'd quit writing a year before I got there. So he was still in there every day, just running around and arranging who knows what. And Marie Severin and John Romita were fairly contemporary, EC era, post-Korean War era, early 50s era. And Jay Coy was a bit older. But mostly they sat around the office and did incredible volumes of work, and we're glad to see all these energetic young people coming in. I think certainly, Starlin was given enormous latitude immediately. Gerber was writing Man-Thing very soon afterward, and there was Marvel wasn't structured in the way that DC was structured. DC was an office. You had Julie Schwartz doing, the Justice League books, and Bob Kanigher doing the war books. And I forget who was handling romance, and someone else is doing the suspense books, Tales of the Unexpected, and so on. And it was controlled performance. Marvel, they didn't know what the books would be until they were turned and finished. And so I was on the coast with Englehart and Jim, and Steve would, plot the Avengers, send the pencils, send it off to Selvas in for pencils. Those would come back, he'd script it, he'd hand it to me for lettering. I'd send it to the inker. Inker would send it to the office. That's the first time they saw the work. They didn't see the script beforehand. They didn't know what was going to be in the issue, which led to some tense moments on occasion. Not really worth going into. Well, one issue with Doc. It was America's bicentennial, and Englehart figured, okay, let's do the mystical history of the United States of America. So we're going back to the Freemasonry that founded the founding fathers and all the things happening then. And Clea became enamored of Ben Franklin, who was pretty much a rake, and so she went to bed with him. And Steve was fired over that issue,
Oh, shit.
which they only learned happened when they got the final artwork in from Palmer. And so immediately Wolfman was the writer on Doctor Strange. And, oh no, that was just an illusion caused by who, Mephisto or Satanish or whatever the heck was going on.
The old
And
Mephisto.
deny. It didn't actually happen, but it's in print. You can still buy a copy.
Can I just tell you, Mephisto is probably Marvel's easiest fix. I mean, it really, the fact that you say that, and I think a couple of weeks back, I was reading Spider-Man New Day, I believe, and it was, I forget the name of it, but Mephisto was like the big fix at the end of that one too, where he just kind of fixed the situation where everyone's memory got wiped of his identity and kind of reset him. I mean, it just, especially now.
That's cowardly.
Well, I mean,
why not just let it be a subset, an imaginary story?
It just, it's their ace in the hole. Wait, it's broken. Add just Mephisto it. It's fine.
Yeah, I must confess, I haven't read any new series since about 40 years ago. When I quit X-Men, I never looked back. So I didn't see what Grant Morrison did or Byrne or, whoever, probably brilliant people have done brilliant work for 40 years.
That was my next question for you is, we talk about old comics and, with air quotes, because, that's ever changing, but and you kind of just answered it, but, at what point did you stop reading or, what were your go-tos in terms of, the comic reading?
It was kind of a sad revelation because, we'd go to the comic shop every week. This was Brian Hibbs, who's a pretty well-known retailer in San Francisco. And I'd buy, this many books every week, trying to get the vantage point. Yeah, 10 books a week, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized after, I've got like a year of books I haven't read yet because I'm so busy working on all these X-Men projects. And then manga came in. We were doing reams of manga around 1990. And I'd read an issue of Cerberus and I realized, I'm not enjoying this book. And I had 10 more following it already in the stack. Different Vertigo things I was enjoying less. And I've already bought all 5 issues. And I figured, well, it's the things I enjoyed most and read up the most, the lengthiest were Justice Society by Mark Waid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was also writing The Flash at that moment, but I can't recall. But maybe it was Bill, because it was a very long time ago. But approximately 1985, even Love and Rockets, there's too much else to do.
No worries. Correct me if this is wrong, but so one of my huge character I'm a huge fan of, other than Superman, as you could see in the back there, is Green Lantern, and I believe you've done Green Lantern season 2.
I did the Green Lantern. Yeah. Brian, good Lord, what's his name? I'm embarrassed. Maybe Brian Cunningham.
Okay.
Very fine guy. Got in touch with me kind of out of the blue and said, I got the Superman project that's needing a letterer. Are you interested? Yes, I'll do Superman. And he said, well, that's still got a couple months. I still get him for the rest of the pencils, but I got something even better. What's better than Superman? Well, it was the Green Lantern by Grant and Liam Sharp. And, holy mackerel. Hal Jordan has been a Lantern for way too long by now. He's really burned out and really angry at everything in the universe, but it's his job. So he's kind of a burned out cop, but fascinated. He's bored on Earth. And okay, so did the first season of that, which is 12 issues, and then the annual, and then I think 3 issues of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing and another. I keep getting lots of work offers. I do mostly indies. And DC's upper management structure, its editorial structure, was just driving me buggy. There'd be too many corrections per issue. Then they come back with more corrections, a second or maybe a third round. I'm not getting paid on staff for all this time spent. In the old days when it was done by hand, you'd hand your book of corrections to, John Workman or Rick Parker, whoever on staff doing corrections. And I mean, being an editor and looking the corrections guy in the eye and saying, can you go over this issue again? And now a third time, because we can't get ourselves together sufficiently to give you the corrections all at once. It wasn't worth the aggravation anymore. It was dreading opening my email to see if there's yet more corrections. You know, it's because it was not a critique of my work, but Grant would edit it, the editor would edit it, the proofreader would make, you know, punctuation changes. And I think, why didn't they do this before I got the script?
Yeah, it sounds like it's a classic case of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, but that's
DC.
Yeah, they're the oldest, they're the old guard, the old established outfit. And I guess Warner gives them a budget and gives them a corporate template. And this is the processes, these are the sequence in which things are done.
Mhm.
And well, with regrets, because I thought Liam was fantastic and I admired Grant's imagination and depth of characterization a good deal. I said, bye. I quit X-Men, you know, long ago, because Claremont was, his life was made too difficult and he left. And I figured, well, it's not reading the same anymore. With all respect to Fabian and the other writers at that moment, Scott Lobdell, it wasn't my X-Men. It didn't sound right anymore to me personally.
So that's interesting. You said that it doesn't sound like your X-Men. So again, if this is a stupid question, by all means tell me. But do you have a say in the tone of how the characters are portrayed? And I don't mean necessarily visually, but let's say, you know, this character wouldn't say this, or, you know, in this way.
No, they didn't pay me to edit the books.
Okay.
I made that very clear almost 50 years ago.
Got it.
I was going to say, how did X-Men come together? Because it's started to pick up steam, and then you and Claremont came on, and it just sort of exploded from there.
I was living in Berkeley then, and as I said, just real ragtag, doing an issue of Ghost Rider, then an issue of Seventh Satan, then an issue of you know, who knows what. They would just send me a Savage Sword of Conan or something entirely at random. And in the mail one day, there was a box and it was X-Men 94. And I didn't think I'd seen Giant Size 1. I knew Dave's work from Legion, which, you know, was fantastic. I knew his fan work a few years before that. And all these new characters, but there was Cyclops, there's Charles, you know, so I figured, okay, this is cool. And just did it in kind of Marvel style, kind of filtered through me. But I figured, you know, I won't get the next issue, so I don't want to get, you know, too crazy with setting up a thing that someone else will have to follow, like weird dialogue balloons or weird dialogue styles. And it took quite a while, but then they started sending me, like, then I got 105, then 111, or maybe 109, whenever Burns started. But they wouldn't commit to it. But yeah, I did lobby for that book because I knew Chris already. When I was in Manhattan, occasionally I'd stay with him. And maybe he was, you know, pounding his fist on the table also, just give me one letterer, you know, give me a consistent, not necessarily myself, but, you know, he wanted a consistent look. This book was climbing in sales, was gaining credibility. And they wouldn't give him the A-level guys, which was at that time Joe Rose and John Costanza, and then Jim Novak came in around 1975. But since he and I knew each other and I was stumbling for the book, yeah, they gave it to me full time, and I was getting better by then, studying calligraphy and kind of, you know, getting a more formal sense of how lettering is done in the legibility, you know, the antiquarian sense.
What do you think made you guys such a good team?
Well, he was brilliant. You know, he really imbued everything he had into those characters. And he knew he didn't have to interact with, you know, Doctor Strange or Captain America, the Hulk, or the Marvel Universe. He knew that they were just going to leave him in his own pocket over to the side. It was issue 123 when Spider-Man appeared. So it was the first Marvel character appearance in X-Men, which is like 30 issues into the run. You know, unprecedented, unheard of. Usually you see your well-known characters in there within the first 6 issues. If sales are kind of flagging to kind of pull people's eyes, at least to the cover. You went 30 issues before they threw in another character. because Byrne was strong. Byrne was incredible. He grew so quickly. The first couple issues, if you look back, if you happen to have those or the reprints, the characters were not really that much in close up. The action wasn't really that interesting. The body language is not that dynamic. And boy, did he grow up quickly. So it was just, I think people just kind of felt charmed by the book. It's like our own little special toy that wasn't created by, Jack Kirby in 1941 or scripted by Stan Lee in 1962. This is a new animal. None of these characters have been anywhere else. And that might have been it. Chris just had this sense of ownership. Cyclops and Jean go back a ways, but I can play with that. They've got this romance back, to almost puberty. That's not me, is it?
That's me.
Okay.
I was saying, did you guys realize that something special was happening with each issue? That, this is stuff that's standing the test of time now. But did you guys realize that then, or just say, hey, we're putting out some pretty decent books?
Well, Chris is a kind of a theatrical personality. If you ever met the fellow or seen him at a convention, hey,
I'm so sorry.
I'm jealous now. Is that the next interview starting up already?
No, I don't know what this is.
So unprofessional, this guy. No.
In my life, we call those telephones. I don't know what they are.
It's happened to me too.
Good thing we can edit this stuff. I'm so sorry.
Okay. I think it's just that everyone was so young. We were just on fire. I was, on the West Coast, as I say. John was up in like Calgary, 1,000 miles from New York. And Chris he's just in outer space. That's just who he is. So, yeah, and Dave also. Dave, Legion of Superheroes, futuristic stuff, all these remarkable costume concepts instead of just the kind of the Kurt Swan standard play on the Superman outfit with the trunks and the cape. He gave me stuff out of like swimsuit catalogs and figures of Hollywood catalogs and the Sears robot catalog. And Starboy has a beard all of a sudden, and just, he took those characters home with him. And John likewise was, Beast having all this weird body language and getting bulkier. And I think it was just exuberance of youth, plus not actually ever socializing, not treating it like a job, but like, I think in a way, and they may dispute this, it was like still doing zines. Just whatever, like fan fiction. There were no adults in the room. Let's just go wild.
That's pretty awesome.
As you're speaking, I can see you holding up your Wacom tablet.
Yes.
So
Never
I wanted to
Into
ask.
my wrist.
I have one of those, and I can never quite get the feel for that. I gotta tell you.
John Workman letters with his Wacom.
Really?
He looks at the monitor and he's lettering on his tablet to the side. There's no eye-hand connection. I tried that for a few hours and it looked so awful.
It's an acquired feel, I gotta tell you. I mean, I know you can toy with settings and whatnot, but I just pen to paper or what have you just feels.
Yeah, ink, that tactile thing. But John is lettering by hand on his Wacom. It's like,
when did you, or why, how, you were early on, you were one of the few that started the, adopting, I guess, the technology into your work. What was your impetus for that?
yeah, that was in 92. I started, I was lettering, let's see. Yeah. Trying to figure out how to not get into too many names and places and details. There was an anime called Nausicaa of the Valley of Wind by Miyazaki. And it was like, the most astonishing anime anyone had ever seen, about 1988. And Viz was going to adapt it through an outfit called Studio Proteus, with which I was essentially creative director, which is to say, of the three of us, there was the translator, and then there was the person that took those translations and made them into scripts, and there was me, and then a couple of other letters who I was overseeing. So creative director, big deal. But okay, so three different kinds of airships, different kinds of guns. And so I was developing different sound effect techniques to use for these things in a kind of a dry style.
Mhm.
And what was the question?
I was just asking you about kind of your
Oh, yes.
about the technology, kind of your reasoning for kind of using that versus the traditional method. Um,
Yeah, there was no Comic Craft yet.
okay.
That was around 95, I think 94. But Nausicaa was so sound effects intensive because the way we were working, which we also did for Eclipse and I guess Innovation and then finally Dark Horse, we got the Japanese stats, photo stats, and the sound effects and the dialogue were there in Japanese. They were still there. So we had to cover the Japanese sound effects completely, but try not to exceed them with English language sound effects.
Okay.
And I turned out to be very good at the geometry of making one thing cover the other and still not look like it's a compromise. And it was so time intensive anymore because working with paint and ink on top of photostat paper and pasting the dialogue down on top of the balloons that were already sitting there.
Mhm.
That our boss, a fellow named Torrin Smith, the late Torrin Smith, said, well, if you develop like typefaces based on your work, you could farm that to someone else and you could just focus on the sound effects. So I had my doubts, but after a year, a solid year, because the typographic software at that time wasn't really interfacing well with my PC.
Mhm.
They needed to do one more upgrade in order for everything to actually work together, which sounds like fraud to me. Had a typeface, and then of course bold, italic, and built a few others over time. Now I've got about a dozen. But I miss the action of pen to paper, of that the tactile sense of it. But it's been so long since I've used those skills, about a decade or more, that I'd have to spend, I'm sure, months getting my hand and musculature, especially my endurance, back up to speed.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I know people have been drawing nonstop all this time. Then why can't you just letter this for me? I said, I don't have the fine motor control anymore. Quit playing the piano for 10 or 12 years and sit down again and see what happens. It can resemble real piano playing, but it's not. You're not going to be happy with it.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the process and how close would you work with the writer and work with the artist to get everything together so it's perfect on the page? Like,
Oh,
was
not
it?
at all.
No, oh, really?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, we never talked.
Huh? Because I heard a story a while ago about Kirby working with Joe Sinnott, and they never met each other until years later. And I just was like, okay, maybe that's a one-off thing, but it's really that big of a separation at times.
Well, now more than then, because in the 40s, 50s, everyone was pretty much working out of New York City because the mail would take so long. There was no FedEx, there was no overnight mail, so Special D would take days to get to Connecticut or New Jersey, wherever you happen to be in it. So yeah, you take the train into Manhattan once or twice a week and pick up jobs and turn in jobs. When I moved to California, I found out years later from someone of the bullpen that it's amazing they didn't cut me off instantly once I was 3,000 miles from home.
Wow.
Because Special D mail would take about a week each way. And there was enough flexibility in the deadlines that was not a problem then. And now that we're all working online, sending things through servers, the deadlines are tighter than ever because people are working more slowly in a way instead of building in a week or two of slack time. Of course, it's also a budgetary thing. DC would have several issues of all the books in process at a time, which is a lot of money flying around at all times before the books are actually published. And now especially now with sales where they are these days, the budgets are real close to the bone.
I gotta say that has to say something about your talent, that they said, all right, he moved to the West Coast, but he's too good. We're going to work with this, instead of being like, all right, we'll just bring someone else in. Like, that had to make you feel pretty good that they still valued you so much. They said, all right, we're going to work this out and we're going to make it, and it lasts a long time.
No, I think they felt that I knew the drill.
Gotcha.
And everyone, I knew their names, they knew my name, they knew how to pronounce my name. And so it was easier to stick with the guy since there was enough time in the schedule. They probably sent me books in the random way they did because those are the ones that had an extra week or two left. They were turned in early by, Sal Buscema or Don Perlin or whomever. Um,
Well, they still had a certain amount of faith in you,
Huh.
that again, you knew the names, but still, that you would get the job done.
it was a charming, I guess would be one word for it. That I'm part of the team. I'm part of Marvel. And at the same time, I moved west in the first place because a fellow named Mike Friedrich, who was a fan turned pro at that time, a letter hack. And he'd written like Robin backup stories for Detective and Batgirl and then Justice League, and came into Marvel for reasons I know nothing about. And so he was writing Iron Man and Kazar Werewolf by Night, kind of B and C level books. I guess Iron Man was an A level book. And writing was on the wall. I wasn't really working out. He didn't have enough new ideas to bring. It was just kind of keeping the flame going. But unlike, well, let's say Grant Morris and Steve Englehart, somebody's just going to go, turn the world upside down, Chris Claremont. Mike was just kind of holding the fort on Iron Man and recycling old villains and not advancing sub characters and introducing new sub characters, just not owning the book. So meanwhile, he was creating a new publishing line. Since one job wasn't working out, create a new one. So we're publishing an outfit called Star Reach. And so that was an anthology of science fiction, fantasy stories, and a sub series called Quack came up with just funny animals. So Scott Shaw was working for that, and a lot of other people. And then a third book called Imagine, which was not exactly suspense, but more supernatural stories. And I was doing quite a bit of work for him. I was doing flyers for a bar, 2 bars. So, keep myself busy, getting settled into the West Coast and kind of becoming a West Coast to San Francisco, Berkeley person and being more locally rooted. So, Marvel was my principal source. And then Roy Thomas was sending me Conan and Invaders and different things. And it was nice to be known that I could do the job that they wanted to see, which kind of agrees with what you just said. Not so much, flattering as I'm in the machine now. I'm part of a dependable set of people. And exciting, getting Sal Buscema pencils and Frank Robbins and John Buscema and, on and on. Just, the fanboy was still active. The fanboy is still active. It's unbelievable at times.
You're also in the Guinness Book of World Records.
I am.
How does that feel?
Now that was staggering. That was awesome because McFarlane, after all, and Todd does so many things so well, and among them is self-promotion. But with Spawn, like in its first or second year, decided, okay, the comic book level toys the DC and Marvel do, they're so dumb. They have almost no flexibility. They look like they're stamped out of the same, there's nothing fun. There's nothing to really grab a kid's imagination as he gets to be past 6. So McFarlane toys set everyone on fire. Everyone had to run to catch up because he was having them hand painted, amazing sculpture going into them, the capes, the costume details. It was, and then, doing, bigger versions. I've got several around here somewhere. Just better looking, more collectible things you put behind, glass so the cats can't knock them over.
Yeah, he does some. I remember when those first came out, there were like the horror line, like Hellraiser and stuff like. It was like bananas, man. And this was I worked at a company for a while where it was cool to have figures on your shelf. And I bought some and I was like, I don't think I could put these on my shelf, and they were awesome. And then I missed the boat on this one. They put out a Metallica set, and I still want that. But at any rate,
they licensed Wizard of Oz and the Demented Wizard of Oz.
Yes, those were the ones that I had purchased at the time, and my girlfriend, was now my wife, who worked at the same office, she was like, no, don't put that, don't do that. Like, this place is cool, but they're not that cool. So maybe hold off on the crazy Dorothy. So but yeah, I mean, that was amazing stuff. I mean, and now the line of DC stuff, that the multiverse stuff, is crazy. I mean,
Yeah, he's
the
doing
the Joker that laughs is like totally right up that alley. So,
Todd
the
is a big kid. He's like
yeah.
55 years old and he's a kid.
Is he still, forgive me for not knowing this, but is he still involved in the writing or production of Spawn? Because I know
He's
he's
been
doing
writing.
like a ton of stuff, like making movies and figures and whatnot. But I mean, is he still integral in the development of Spawn?
Todd has been writing Spawn for about 100 issues. We
Okay.
just did issue 316.
Okay.
And I think he started writing it again with 185. So it's about 150 issues. He dropped it for a while
Okay.
because he was developing new concepts, designing toys, inking the covers, inking a lot of the interiors. But he's a competitive guy. He was an athlete first. He went to college on a baseball scholarship
Okay.
and looked around and realized, not many people get into the majors, but a lot of people draw comic books. And he was, always a gifted illustrator, a good storyteller. So yeah, he started pushing himself toward that. And I let it, because he was, okay, Englehart was writing a book called Coyote for a Marvel imprint called Epic, Creator owned. And he had a backup feature happening, and another artist had dropped away. I don't remember the specifics anymore, and needed somebody new, or else he just needed another face. So he looked through the X-Men slush pile and essentially just, gave him a stack this tall of artwork of submissions. And there was Todd. And so Englehart had him, and so I led Todd's first professional comics work around 1985. And so when Spawn came up, he remembered me for that. And you also, since they were kind of, flensing away all the top people at Marvel, they identified with people at Marvel, figured, okay, let's put that X-Men energy onto my book. But he's hands-on with everything. I saw his office when I was out there for the Spawn 301 signing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got about like 20 people working for him, modelers and painters. They do all sorts of prototypes of everything.
Wow.
It's just incredibly intense, and these are on top of everything.
And how many issues of Spawn have you been a part of?
Okay, so yeah, that's where this is going. It's been 29 years now on Spawn.
Wow.
I didn't letter issue 44. My wife and I disagree on the reason that it went that way, but she did that one. Otherwise, I did them all. And Todd, being the baseball guy, the competitive guy, if you could, Dave Sim did 300 issues of Cerebus the Aardvark. So Todd is going to do at least 301. And so he had a big signing in where he lives near Phoenix for issue 301. He rented a movie theater for the day. Well, not the theater itself, just the lobby. So there's concessions there. This was in like August, September, or October even. And it was hot that day. And we signed between 800 and 1,000 books that day. He had a special edition published for that day. It's dated on the cover, Spawn 301 day.
Wow.
And it was not sold except that day. And we signed scads of them, tons of them, chatting with everybody. And the line was out around the block and around the corner. And they were standing in the sun all day long to get 5 minutes of FaceTime or fewer with me and Todd and Jason Alexander, who was drawing it at that moment. And I think it was 2 signatures per customer. And most of them had a copy of that issue 301.
Wow.
And so that puts Todd at 301 issues in the Guinness Book, because that's the most self-published issues of a continuing comic book. And a lot of people, Ben Oda, John Costanza, a lot of people, Todd Klein, have lettered far more books than I have, but not on one series. And that's how world records work, after all. It's not how great you are, it's how great you are sitting in one chair the longest. And I've sat in this chair with Todd for 29 years. Well, he's in his own chair, but Or else he stands and
It's
paces
a big,
all day long.
it's a big chair. You guys can both fit.
Yeah.
I want to ask
Yeah.
about that because you said you've established yourself at Marvel as solid, dependable. Image comes, it kind of disrupts everything. You jump onto Image.
Well, I know I quit Marvel 2 weeks earlier.
Okay,
I figured, what am I going to do now? I
right,
could have called the Avengers office, Fantastic Four office. I didn't know those people. So I'd
Right.
only worked for, Bob Harris, Anna Senti, Wheezy on X-Men for umpty years. It was about 18 years.
Mhm.
So I put myself into a little corner off to the side and didn't know them.
Right.
And didn't want to take for granted that they'd find me anything to do.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know if I was the A-list, the B-list, if I was even visible,
Mhm.
since they never interacted with me.
Jeez.
It's like, fiefdoms.
Yeah.
I've never worked in any kind of other office. I don't know if that happens, that if you're the top salesman for, office A, if anyone else in the corporation knows you exist, or if you're just with office A.
Right.
And that was me. So I was doing manga and then, wondering, well, I guess I'll find something else to do. And then Toddy called. And I was like, I think the second person he called when it was, his subset of Image was starting up.
Wow.
Now that was flattering.
I was gonna say,
Wow.
I
did
don't
it?
know where he got my number, if he called everyone in San Francisco and figured he'd find me eventually.
Because William Ezra Loeb said that he sort of had to be convinced to join Image. He was a little bit on the fence about it. Didn't really, wasn't too sure. Did you have any
was
trepidation?
new,
Yeah,
but they had capitalization.
right.
These guys already were wealthy from drawing Spider-Man, all the top books for a
Mhm.
couple of 3 years. The royalties were staggeringly high.
What was that like then? Because Image was pretty much on top of the comic world. Like they were pretty much printing money when they were printing books. Did you feel that sense of excitement when you were there? Did you see, the tides changing in the comic market?
Well, I was getting paid pretty well too at that moment, I must say. um, Complicated question. Things, because like the tone of Marvel was changing. Miller was really maybe the first one to suddenly lash out and create an entirely new sense of how to deal with costume characters. He got Shooter pretty mad at him. Jim said, okay, there was Daredevil was like, sales were increasing. When Frank was put onto the book, it was a bi-monthly, which meant that it's kind of, well, it could go either way. Maybe we're facing cancellation. Let's wait and see. And it skyrocketed with what he was doing. And Shooter said, being reasonable, being the boss of a large company, maybe you ought to have like some other characters guest starring, like they did with Spider-Man and the X-Men after a few years. Maybe with some best stars, and you've got all this litter in the streets. Does it really have to be so filthy in New York City? And so Frank said, okay, being reasonable. And so, okay, so he put in Power Man and Iron Fist, and it's kind of a B level book, lesser selling book. And so the basis of the story is a ticker tape parade, so litter everywhere, which is blinding Daredevil because his radar is pinging off of everything for blocks in all directions. And meanwhile, something is happening and he's got to deal with it, except there's all this litter in the air. And meanwhile, back in the office, Luke and Danny are eating pizza with Foggy Nelson, and they have no involvement with the story whatsoever, except they're there in costume. And Shooter was furious. He said, took my little pals backly and shook him and said, I hate what you did here. And you did it extraordinarily well. So keep doing whatever it is you do. Yeah. So yeah, Miller, flipped him off. Oops, you'll edit that out. I'll do it my way and I'll take your advice and I'll do it my way with your advice. And okay, so Chris and John, and then Chris and Paul Smith, and Chris, and just finding new ways to do the stuff. And so then Toddy and Rob and Eric, Jim Valentino with Guardians of the Galaxy, They were taking, kind of discarded concepts, discarded characters, and finding whole new ways of looking at them. Spider-Man suddenly became sexy. The webbing became almost a living thing instead of just being this crosshatch stuff being shot off of buildings. And that, the excitement that they created there. Think about that Jim Lee issue of X-Men. I just got the hardcover from Scott Dunbier. It's got Wolverine, Captain America, and Black Widow on the cover.
Yep.
Holy smoke. That one should have sold 2 million copies just because of that cover. What a great cover. Jim Lee looked so incredible on that book. And all the way down the line, Rob is kind of controversial, but no one else looked like he did. And he set the 17-year-old fans on fire with what he was doing with the kind of otherwise stodgy, with all respects, to Brett Blevins and Wheezy, with X-Force, New Mutants. And so when they decided to do Image, and here's this crazy Savage Dragon character and this crazy Spawn character, and so on. It's a crazy Nighthawk. It's like, whoa. Our fanboy instincts, this gets back to what Starlin was doing way back with Captain Marvel and Warlock. Just these adolescent testosterone impulses right there on the page. You can't ignore them. They're so vital and so insistent. Yeah, that was an amazing time. If you guys were reading comics then 30 years ago, you saw it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Why has Spawn worked so well for you, though? What is it about the relationship you have with Todd, the relationship you have with Image, and the relationship you have with the character that's kept you on, that it's working so well?
Todd has a vitality. He's doing it if you read the book at all, it's a procedural. It's not just this, this kind of disoriented guy who can't really believe he's dead, living in the alleys among, derelicts and the homeless, and being kind of a god to them because he gets things done. He makes their lives somewhat better and makes sure they aren't threatened as much. And now it's, into international intrigue and police procedural style storytelling. And Todd just put out a video release in the last couple of weeks, so I'm not like spilling any beans here, but he's got a subset of characters that are going to be getting some new books real soon, because he's just on fire still after 30 years. He's got all these new ideas. He's got other spawns he wants to examine, other timeframes he wants to examine, and it's irresistible because he's not bored.
That's all.
And he's not going to write all of these books,
right,
but the names he's dropping are stellar. And I think I'll be lettering them all, but we'll see. I can only do so much.
So we're good that we got you now before all that work picks up, and you don't have time.
I think the first of his new series will be released in August, and this is only March. So there's still a bit of, so I've got, some other gigs I'm doing on the side.
Great.
Some small publishers.
How is it, though, that the fan in you, the comic fan in you, does it ever sit back and say, look at the names of the people I've worked with, look at the books I've been on, look at the legacy I created? Like, it's got to be, pretty awesome sometimes. Just sit back and be like, listen, I was part of all this.
Well, I'll go to a comic shop or go to a con, and they're up on the wall will be like Jungle Action 6. Right. McGregor and Buckley's Black Panther.
Yep.
Or any number of things. And, the first issues I've done, Wolverine, New Mutants, X-Men 94, just so many things, which were just gigs as they were happening. I get more conscious about the enormity of what's happening here. Here's Chris and Frank Miller doing Wolverine. Mm-hmm. Of course, they're doing Wolverine. Why wouldn't these guys do Wolverine of all the logical teamings? It's staggering. It just, to be considered to be adequate, to be among people who are considered universally to the top of the field, right, or to be offered like a Superman book just out of the clear blue. I've worked rarely for DC. I guess that means I'm on the A list. But you can't take a thing like that for granted.
Yeah.
I'm just doing my job. I'm trying to be interesting and on time. And you can't always do both, but you try.
You're doing a heck of a job, it seems. And
you know more than I do.
Now, there's something I wanted to ask you, because you're working there in the 70s. How, in your mind, how big a factor was it for Marvel to have Stan Lee out there, hyping the books, getting the word out? Um, how important do you think he was to the success of the books selling, or do you think the books itself were selling themselves and you know he was doing his own thing?
I think Stan was just good for comics overall because he was visible.
Right.
Who besides Stan is visible? Julie Schwartz, Will Eisner, you can name a lot of names. Kirby, Gil Kane, Steranko. Who is like Robert Crumb is the most prominent name after Stan Lee, kind of when you get down to it, as someone who shook everything up.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't want him speaking for you necessarily. Yeah, Stan was oh gosh, like the George Lucas or the prominent, the Spielberg, the Stephen King.
Right.
The one name that people think of if they think of anywhere else, the Colonel Sanders.
Right.
Because really, who else? You got Burger King. That's not really a person. Colonel Sanders was, well, kind of a person, kind of not a person. But there aren't that many spokesmen for a single business at all, ever. And so Stan was this kind of corny, silly guy, easy to make fun of. He was kind of a Bill Shatner figure in a way.
Yeah, they're unique in that sense. I mean, DC doesn't have that person. I mean, he was so integral in the development of all these, tent pole characters. DC just, I don't want to rag on anyone, or any particular company, especially the ones that I like. But DC got their stuff from everyone else, whereas Marvel had, not one guy, but Stanley was one of the guys that created all these major characters. So
the controversy here is so thick you can cut it with a knife.
I know. I don't
dance around it, but he was there.
Yeah,
he was there since Captain America 3 in 1941 when he was an annoying teenage pest. I get that, but Simon and Kirby left. And Goodman was really running the show more than Jack, and I'm sure he had art directors. It was a pretty big, at one time, Atlas in the 50s, they were publishing 75 books a month.
That's a lot.
And then in 57, they had their implosion. It was cut down to 10. Everyone laid off. Staggering. Somebody went to DC, or else this new Mad Magazine deal, Sick Magazine, Cracked Magazine, they, to the four winds.
Right.
And they were standing while in the 50s, dealing with Martin Goodman's whims, DC has this war comic, give me 6 war comics. Right. Or this romance thing is taken out, give me 6 romance books. And he would, and he would, I made this. Right. I kept Goodman happy through the 40s. The company didn't evaporate in the 50s like Charlton and so many did after the Comics Code was imposed. He kept hiring really good people, and the bullpen he had, because I'm a big collector, a big purchaser, I should say. I'm not trying to get sets of Atlas Westerns and war comics. And the suspense books kind of as a subset because those cost more. But Reed Crandall, all the leftover EC artists, Bertie Krigstein, Gray Morrow, Joe Orlando, Infantino, they were all working for Stan, Russ Heath, Bill Everett carrying on consistently, Carl Burgos continually. Just great looking books. Charlton looked, except they had Ditko, nowhere near as good as what Atlas is doing. And Stan was managing this whole thing. And then it collapsed in 57. They rebuilt it in 58 with Kirby, Ditko, Don Heck, Dick Ayers, and Paul Reinman kind of a little bit to the side. And then the romance books, the Patsy Walker books. And that was Stan overseeing this whole thing. So if he got carried away, kind of who knows what he was thinking, say, well, I co-created these things with Jack. No, Jack created the character concepts. Stan fleshed them out. Jack couldn't script that way. Lieber couldn't, up to a point, script that way, but Stan went through several other scripters during the first Marvel year or two, 62, 63, Robert Bernstein, Jerry Siegel. And in the end, Stan took it all over. And then he was going nuts, I guess. So he hired Roy Thomas because there's too many books. and they were running for, successfully for 3-4 years. So yeah, it's time to get someone else to help with writing all these ongoing continuities. And so he was the guy there, with the garden gloves and the shovel, doing the spade work and making this thing, planting the seeds, keeping it going. And making suggestions to Ditko, maybe, to Kirby up to a point. But, then writing with Don Heck and the other subset books with Dick Ayers. So he was fantastically involved. And people just, keep saying he created this, created that. Well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But he kept moving after Kirby left. It's still there. This is important.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing I want to touch on is I'm not hugely familiar with manga, but you were there sort of, it's the 90s. It's, it's starting to take shape in America. Now it's kind of exploded. Now it's really all over the place. It's very popular. Did you think that was going to be possible? Did you think that it had the potential to do that?
No. No, it's so mainstream. As you got the DC animation, I guess Tiny Titans or some darn things, whatever they are, manga looking. Yeah, no one thought it was going to be more than just kind of a side thing, a weird thing in black and white using the Japanese artwork. And then a company called Tokyo Pop turned up, I guess, about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, producing as much in a month as we produced out of studio produce in a year.
Wow.
There was a limitless desire, a bottomless taste for this stuff. That's a lousy metaphor. Unquenchable thirst for this stuff that no one expected. And we were taking tremendous care to make it look more or less like American books. The standard of the lettering that was intended looked like it was going to be American science fiction books, more or less, with kind of exaggerated artwork. And Tokyo Pop has gone out of its way. You read them back to front, as it were, and the pages aren't flipped to read left to right for American style. They read right to left. And they're subtitling the sound effects, which are then being left there in kanji and katakana and hiragana, instead of being painted over as we were doing into US English. Wouldn't have thought, no, but it expanded so rapidly.
Right.
And
how much of a learning curve was it for you going from Marvel to that?
It was fun.
Okay.
I guess that's the best kind of learning curve. It's fun.
And you're also doing Yeet.
I am DS. I'm working for Mike Jones with great pleasure and enthusiasm. I'm re-scripting him up to a point, and I'm plotting a Black Fury subset that might actually someday occur, called Black Fury's Day Off.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, Mike Jones is a helicopter pilot for a living, delivering emergency supplies and medicines and firefighting equipment and who knows what, machine parts, air conditioning units on tops of skyscrapers.
Is he really?
And he gets 10 days on,
Never
10
knew
days
that.
off.
Okay.
The hell's he
And
doing?
publishing
with
Yeet
comics?
is his hobby.
Wow.
And going to conventions and, pressing the flesh, meeting people, helping Bill Loebs, having me on hand. He just likes doing this. And so his hobby is to produce a comic book.
That's great.
That's
I never knew that. I never knew that. I've been reading about him and within the past month or so, kind of deep diving into Yeet. I didn't know that about him. And now next time I talk to him,
this might be secret stuff. I don't know.
I'm going to pick his brain about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Mike's wide open. He's fine.
Yeah, he's a cool dude.
But I figure, okay, so Black Fury is an operative. He's basically, Captain America operating within the SHIELD structure. I figure, okay, someone like that, someone is facing harm's way in Afghanistan or something on an assassination mission or whatever the heck it is they do, because I don't know what this agency does, really. No one does it. They're covert. You probably get some serious time off, maybe 10 days on, 10 days off. So Black Fury gets time off. Predictable. And he's out of his time. He was given the frozen treatment. He was put in suspended animation in 1943, I think, when he was 32 years old. The war had not ended. A lot of things hadn't happened or even begun. There were no electric guitars. Lots of things that we take for granted, unimaginable. So he'll never feel at home now. And so I figured his day off, well, how is he adjusting? Not too well, but he's finding ways. And I've got some pretty wild stuff in mind.
That's awesome.
Subtle, like I say about Love and Rockets, I'm gonna have to reread those because, how do you write normal people interacting with the world that's sometimes hostile and sometimes indifferent and it ain't yours? And yeah, I got some stuff, and maybe someday I'll actually get it in the shape that can be handed to an artist.
That's pretty awesome.
I look forward to reading that.
Really surprised. Because I don't understand villainy. I don't understand, because if you I've read like old DC annuals, you got Batman and Robin and Superman, and they're fighting people who are robbing banks. The Joker and the Penguin and all these outlandish guys, they're robbing banks, or if they're ambitious, they're robbing jewelry stores. Captain Cold is robbing jewelry stores. That's it. You got this cold gun.
There's so many things you could freeze,
Yeah, and you're robbing banks. The Mirror Master is robbing banks. The writers didn't know what to do with villainy.
Right.
And I don't understand why people are lousy. Badly intended or oppressive or abusive. I don't understand that stuff. So I don't care to write that stuff. So how does Black Fear relate to present day? That's what I care about.
Well, who are
Mike says go for it. Because we're not here to make a profit. It's free. It's just handed out for free. It's a zine in the truest sense. So, okay.
Who have you worked with that has handled villainy well, that you think?
Well, everybody.
Okay.
Marvel, because it's just the way things happened. I was a Marvel guy for a long time. I've touched into DC, and lately I'm touching the Marvel a bit, but I don't really identify with the place. Because I don't know anybody there, for one thing. The senior most editors weren't there when I left 40 years ago. Villainy, it's like unsympathetic self-interest, right? So you've got these conquering races like the Kree Skrull Wars, or like if you're watching Star Trek Discovery, is that the current one? Oh, yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, the Klingons are not like humans, but they've got their own internal logic. It's just that they find ours to be so foul and offensive and oppressive that we have to be wiped out because that's what they do. But they have some sympathy within their own structures. And I don't know how you come up with that stuff. It's, easy to create stereotypes. The Klingons are stereotypes, but then so are humans.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather deal with this guy just learning how to be a guy. But like Englehart, I don't know, he gave us like the Cosmic Madonna. He had Kang from the future, who was just really mad at the past and kept attacking and attacking and attacking. He'd go back and regroup for a couple of years, then attack the Avengers the next day because he's at the Lord of Time. Maybe that's why I quit. Like, I don't watch The Flash or any of these things on the CW because I don't think they're done that well. Because superhero stuff is too rarefied to make sense when humans are performing it, as opposed to pen and ink performing it.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah, these are difficult questions, deeply philosophical stuff, because there's going to be, Superman and Batman and these folks next month ad infinitum. Action Comics 1000. Who would have thought that'd be possible?
Right. That's a good point.
I was having a conversation online with someone in one of the fan groups about the way the Skrulls were treated in FF number 2. And I found out they didn't know then that there'd be an FF number 7. Hulk was canceled with 6. If the first couple don't sell well, that's over. It's done. They didn't know it was going to go on for 60 years. They didn't know it was going to go on for 1 year. And you got to keep this in mind. This is, as fanboys, we see it one way, but as a business, you got to sell units. We didn't know X-Men was going to go on all this time, or that we got a second artist because it was successful enough to wear out the first artist.
I say, what was your experience like working with Jim Shooter?
We got along well. Again, I was on the West Coast, so I'd see him once in a while when I was in New York. I lived in New York again from 78 to 81. So the punk rock thing was happening, man. Oh, great clubs in those years.
Yeah.
And I still had my hair was long then. I wasn't wearing a mohawk or, safety pins to my nose or anything. And so Jim was having his fights with, Simonson, Claremont, Byrne, whomever. But I was not in a position to threaten him because I wasn't submitting plots that were going too far or not far enough, or characters that were acting out of character, or drawing the characters wrong. When Marshall Rogers came on to Doctor Strange, he made him look vaguely Asian again and put the black dots on his gloves and did a few touches that Ditko had done back in 1962, 63. And Jim said, if you're going to change a character's appearance, that might be okay, but let us know first that you intend to do so. And he was, trying to be a moderator that way because, these characters are all 20 years old. But I'd go out to get beer with him. I didn't threaten him in any way because I wasn't challenging his authority or causing him to have to consider a different way of looking at the Hulk or something. So yeah, we got along fine.
All right. I just have one last question, which is, moment you were first absolutely starstruck meeting someone in comics. Who was it, and what was the experience like?
Oh, person. Because getting artwork, which is alive. Pencil artwork is alive. Ink is pretty good too. The Gene Colan pencils, Jack Kirby Ditko pencils. I had these things.
That's awesome.
John Byrne pencils.
You don't have them anymore?
Well, I lettered them and gave them back to the office.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, fair enough.
My take on that, which is a fair thing. It's, I feel like I own them all for an hour.
Right.
That's still pretty
Those
cool.
are mine to do with as I wish.
Right.
Within the parameters of an acceptable job performance.
So then we all own your work in some form then.
Yeah, and thank you for having the interest in doing so. The person, I talked with Gil Kane once.
Okay.
I was going to be writing a book for McFarlane, and I wanted Gil to draw it. And actually, Todd didn't care for that idea because he thought he was too old-fashioned looking. But talking to Gil Kane, who is probably about the age I am now, but he had that white hair and he had the long face and the gestures, and I called him my boy, which he started doing when he was in his middle 30s because he was forgetting everyone's names, even the people he worked with. So it became kind of my boy, almost like a Southern gentleman.
Yeah.
That might have been because, having met Englehart, Starlin, people my own age, my contemporaries, that's, pretty much the deal, meeting Shooter, meeting Wheezy or Walt or Chaykin or whomever. But yeah, Gil Kane, he's probably the only older person I talk with as a potential employer, that he might be my client. And I think I'm not worthy. What I have to offer is not good enough for this person to work on. And I think that's really the acid test. Because Shooter never had that kind of, that kind of fear. I'm sure Jim Lee or anyone else that's in a position of hiring and firing isn't in awe of having like Kurt Swan or someone like this, John Buscema walk into the room, or whoever is, is the well-known 50-year-old artist today.
Right.
Because I don't know who anyone is. I'm so out of touch. When I was going to be at the signing back there for Spawn, I said, who else is going to be in it? She said, Todd's going to be there and Jason Alexander. And I say, I don't think I know his work. And she said, he's been drawing Spawn for the last 2 years. Okay.
Well,
there are no credits on the books anymore except on the inside cover.
Right.
And who looks at that? If I haven't lettered his name on a splash page, I don't know what his name is.
Well, you got to meet him then.
Yeah, nice guy. Everyone's a nice guy.
And now people are asking you for your autographs.
Yeah, I do lots of autographs.
Yeah.
Oh, you want? Okay. Just one.
How is that though? I mean, you're a comic book fan, and now you're the dude who's signing autographs for people. Like, you're the guy that they want to meet.
Well, it's still a personal thing. If someone, I think I limit it to like 6 books now at a time, just because people do line up like 10 or 15 deep. Because I'm the old guy and I worked on the Black Panther, and all these things that are, significant parts of the canon. But I make a point, open the splash page. Do you want to sign on the cover on the splash page? Usually it's on the cover these days. But I'll open it up because I haven't seen a lot of these books in, many, many years. I'll make, some comment about this and that, just to kind of make the book kind of a personal experience for the person I'm looking at. Paul Smith, my God, he didn't even stay a year and everyone still remembers his stuff, this kind of thing.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's pretty amazing, but it gives me a chance to travel. Yeah, I was going to be in Toledo last February, late in the month. And on the Wednesday before the con, which is going to start Friday, I called the promoter because he was going to send someone to pick me up and drive me from Cleveland to Toledo, which is maybe 2 hours. I really don't know for certain. And I figured, really? It's not like I'm going to be pulling people in at the door, but I kind of am, just by having the name that's this long. And on the manifest of guests. I don't remember who else was going to be there. Anyway, so on Wednesday night, I called and said, whatever his name is, Joe, it's too much COVID talk. It's starting to sound really like tense. It's going to be around this one. He said, no, we're going to have the thing on Friday. It's just no problem. We're just going to open up as planned. And 8 hours later, the governor shut down all events over 50 people.
Wow.
Yep.
So I didn't go to Toledo. But I'm in that kind of rarefied atmosphere now that I'm actually a sought after attendee. Now that's weird. That's very weird.
But well deserved. I mean,
Definitely.
you've been working.
Definitely.
But you think, Frank Miller, Bill Sienkiewicz, Brian Boland, there's a lot of names, Alan Davis, you think, okay, here's your headliners. Here's the people that people are going to talk about. Tony Isabella here locally. But me? Moi?
Exactly. That's why you're that guy, though.
Well,
that's why you're in that company, because the people that think that they deserve to be in there, they don't always need to be.
But Neil Adams, there's so many people.
Oh, that guy.
Think about it. Neil Adams.
Well,
I mean, a short name. Give me Rubenstein. Give me Sienkiewicz. Give me a real name.
Well, Tom, I want to thank you for joining us and taking the time out of your day and installing Zoom on your computer so we can have this discussion.
Because I know about half an hour.
I'm sorry that you had to do that.
I'll send you a bill.
I'm sorry. And my son, apparently.
Your son needs you.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor talking to you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Joe Marcello.
Warren Phillips.
Forgot there for a second.
Yeah, took me a second.
All respect.
Yeah.
And be sure to like and subscribe. And Tom, do you want to plug anything?
Oh, let's see. Currently, I'm working on a graphic novel called Zana, Z-A-N-A. She's a young woman in Africa. She's an African woman in Africa. She's about 14. It's a collection of about 400 pages. We started working on it about 5 years ago. It's finally finishing up now.
Okay.
That'll be out toward August. I did a graphic novel.
And where can people find that? Will that be on the usual comic
I imagine if there's still
sites?
comic shops in the fall.
Okay.
These are dangerous times. Some of the books said were only available at conventions.
Okay.
I'm told that's actually a viable platform now, that just skip diamond and distribution altogether and still only sell them at cons.
Huh.
I know a guy that sold 5,000 copies of his book at New York Comic Con last year.
Oh, brother.
So yeah, you can bypass distribution altogether. So
Yeah.
and I don't know when these things will be out because they're graphic novels, so they're hundreds of pages. So with regrets, there was a Chris Claremont 50th anniversary special from Marvel about a month ago. I wanted to pick that up. Bill Sienkiewicz, a lot of very good people in there, and J. Scott Campbell.
That's pretty cool.
And I guess that's actually honestly it.
Great.
And
Well,
Spawn.
And Spawn.
Spawn, my God. Yeah, Spawn
How could you
316
forget?
316 will be out in about a week.
Great.
Yeah, I turn the files in and a week later it's on the stands.
Oh, great. So I'll make sure I time this so for that release. That'd be great.
Yes, I think that'll be out next Wednesday.
Okay. All right, great. And hopefully my partner won't be in the next one. Anyway.
He's
Again,
watching this so he can take over your job in about
he-
5 years.
that's fine. I don't want to do, I can live off of him. So thank you, everybody. Hope to see you guys again next week. And it's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you.